All right, ladies and gents, please do take a seat. We are back underway now as we move to the next of our sessions. This is the city of today and tomorrow, challenges and smart options. So once again, we gave our panelists a range of questions to ponder upon in the lead up to the conference. Some of the elements are here. It's a given that technology is directly impacting public and private transport, energy and almost all other industries, and this will in turn impact infrastructure and our cities. So we have a panel of digital infrastructure and civil engineering leaders who are going to be offering their vision over the course of this session, ably led by Managing Director of IMC Worldwide, Gavin English. Now, some of the elements we asked them to consider was, what is the impact of the global digital economy on future cities? What does the speed and diversity to which technology is brought to market today mean for business and work as we know it? And also, how are the complexity, size, and the risk profiles of projects changing? That's just to name a few of the elements we asked them to ponder upon. So we're going to get your take on it. Once again, if we can get the apps out, so if you have your smart device, your phone, a tablet, we will now vote on some of these questions here and see what your thoughts are in relation to this range of questions. So let's have a look now. The first of these is, do you feel our industry is ready for artificial intelligence in the way we deliver our services? Okay, bearing in mind the last set of questions. So here we have it. Do we feel our industry is ready for artificial intelligence in the way we deliver our services? Yes or no? Simple, quick, binary answer. Yes or no? A few seconds to go there as we go. Fantastic level of engagement we have here in the room as well. Let's just see what we have. Okay, here we are. The answer to this question is... No, we do not believe this. We do not believe this within the room. Okay, perhaps we can find answers to this or ways we change our minds. Let me see, look at this from here. As we move to the next of our questions here, which is our industry willing to embrace and use artificial intelligence programs and the Internet of Things to deliver infrastructure development? Again, this is a yes or no question. Let us have a quick look. Here we go. Is our industry willing to embrace and use AI programs or the Internet of Things to deliver infrastructure development? Yes or no? The answers are showing so far that there is a large level of opportunity here across the industry. Well, thank you very much indeed for your voting. The answers are we ready to embrace it? It seems that yes, overall we are ready to embrace this. So the third question we have is, with rapid urbanisation and the move to smart cities, do we need to enhance the skill sets and resources we have to introduce embedded technology in our future engineering solution? Let's have a look. With rapid urbanisation and the move to smart cities, do we need to enhance the skill sets and resources we have to introduce embedded technology in our future engineering solution? Is this a yes or a no?
Activate.
I'm just keeping that going for the moment just to see how many responses we actually end up doing getting.
Yes, so 80%.
It's be activated, Greg.
Okay. Okay, here we go. And the answer is yes, indeed. Okay, moving on. So, ladies and gents, this moves us into our next panel session, and it's ably moderated by Gavin English. So we'd like to welcome him here to join us to say a few words as we start the session. I'll get a round of applause. Ladies and gents, FIDIC Executive Committee Member, Director of IMC Worldwide since 2001, Gavin English.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this, the first deep dive panel of today. You're in for a treat. We've got a fantastic lineup of four great speakers here. It was interesting just looking at those results. It seems to me that we're not ready, we haven't got the resources, but we're willing, which is good. So let's try and move on from that. So what I'd just like to do perhaps is sort of set the scene and give a little bit of my thought and a bit of overview, really looking at technology-enabled interconnected infrastructure, the people, what types of governance, how we facilitate governance, urban governance, and investment. So as we move forward, we all know that cities are engines of economic development and hub trades, and they're essential, therefore, to national, regional, and global growth. We also know that the world urbanisation is moving at an unprecedented rate, and that's going to continue into the future. Putting that into perspective, 55% of the world's population live in urban areas now, and that's expected to rise to 68% by 2050. The gradual shift of people from rural to urban areas, combined with the overall population growth, is likely to add 2.5 billion people to our urban areas by 2050. And what's important about that is 90% of those people are likely to be in Asia and Africa. The number of megacities with a population of more than 10 million has tripled since 1990, and it's now expected to be up to 43 by 2030. So, with this growth and demand, there's going to be a big demand for buildings, mobility, clean air, water, energy, and convenience of city dwellers is going to rise. Emerging innovations and increased connectivity via the internet and smart devices promises to help solve some of these issues by using these advances and help develop, improve and connect infrastructure to create buildings with zero carbon footprints, end traffic jams, recycle and harvest clean water and air, and to create low-cost clean energy and improve lives. So what will the city of tomorrow look like? Decades ago, people imagined future cities with flying cars and space-age buildings perched high into the sky. We're not quite there yet. We're not in the space cities as yet. But modern architecture has given us perhaps a taste of what the future will look like. Futuristic buildings and skyscrapers we see dotted around our cities around the world. For example, Tokyo, Shanghai, Dubai, Toronto, or just a few. So, we're seeing the changes in the physical infrastructure, but the biggest difference will be in the way we interact. It is more a matter of the unseen, unheard creep of covert data collection and real-time response. That's the big change. The engineering obstacles in creating smart cities are significant, but they are being overcome and will be overcome. The future smart cities will have future fully integrated infrastructure with smart transportation services, including autonomous vehicles, internet and communication systems, water services, and electrical and power grids, all connected and unified. This will require mega city-wide systems with the computing power to process the massive amounts of raw data, new algorithms, smart connected digital platforms, drawing data from the desperate Internet of Things, and also artificial intelligence programs will all be needed. As technology becomes embedded in more everyday objects and parts of objects, so the dynamics of the city systems and the city lifestyle will change from a layered and linear set of data collection, analysis and reaction to a real-time exchange of sensing and response across a very broad spectrum of city operations and activities. The Internet of Things involves the interlinking of networks, devices and data, and it is the collective power of these disparate elements that lies at the heart of the power of the Internet of Things and smart cities. It allows us to connect people, things and places in new ways and build new services, combining things and locations for a responsive city experience and shared resources. Coordinating our public services and access also serves to ease congestion, reduce pollution and increase mobility. Smart cities are where the sharing economy meets the digital and physical world simultaneously and sustainably. The future smart city will employ a number of purpose-built artificial intelligence programs and machine learning algorithms to process the vast amounts of incoming data. These programs will leverage rapid improvements in the computing and neural networks in the coming decades. Sensors, whether cameras, acoustic networks, and other wireless systems, will communicate information about the health and status of our city and the infrastructure. Satellites and orbital platforms will monitor the city's atmosphere, pollution levels, weather systems, and local environment, and they'll pay particular attention to the potential threats of natural disasters. Sufficient energy and power for our cities will be generated from clean, renewable sources: wind, solar, geothermal, electric, and perhaps even fusion at one point. Part of the challenge will also be in creating multiple redundant infrastructure and technology systems and system of systems, and numerous backups should one fail, and also the ability to isolate failures and prevent them spreading. This will be crucial to limiting the damage inflicted by natural disasters and more malicious human activity, such as war, terrorism, cyber attacks, etc. Unfortunately, the more connected these systems become, the more subjective they're going to be to cyber attacks and future attacks. And that's going to be a challenge for designers of the future. But cities are about people, and we need to ensure smart cities are environmentally friendly, pleasant and healthy, convenient places to live. And to do this, we must consult with people, understand their behaviour and desires. Such psychological studies really have to be a part of the plan and design process going forward for our future cities. Urban vertical farms using vertical buildings to produce food and keep food will feed the cities. All of this is going to require enormous investment in infrastructure and technology. I mentioned earlier that 90% of the additional 2.5 billion people that are going to move to urban areas in 2050 will be in Asia and Africa. Building one-off smart cities like Abu Dhabi's Masdar is one thing, but if we think about established cities in developing countries where the challenges and the changes needed in the innovation are very much more challenging due to the constraints of space, traffic congestion, environmental, energy and water problems, safety issues, and often poor urban governance and planning. So growing urban cities in developing countries is going to need significant investment. It's going to need innovative thinking and the right urban governance and commitments going forward to look to these challenges. And we're seeing increasing financial commitments from government, from NDBs and IFIs, and also some of the private sector, which will help finance some of the investment needed. An example of this is the recent commitment from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to finance infrastructure for sustainable cities in Asia. Their aim is to support the Asian cities to be economically, environmentally and socially sustainable by being green, resilient, efficient, accessible and thriving, or GREAT for short. However, conventional infrastructure investment and development to support this demand and rapid growth is not going to be enough. So we need to think about innovative financing. Perhaps one of the options is financing by land capture value, whereby the benefits of the infrastructure projects are capitalised into the land values and they fund the respective infrastructure projects going forward. In addition to that, we'll need pension funds, bonds and various other forms of funding, and some we probably haven't even thought of yet. So that's a kind of high-level view of cities of tomorrow. What I'd like to do now is invite our guest presenters to do a deep dive into some of that and add more detail to it. I'm not going to introduce their bios. You have that in your pack, and we're short for time, so I prefer just to call them up one by one. After each speaker has spoken, if there's any point of clarification, I'll ask the speaker. Otherwise, we'll move straight on to the next one. Once we've got through the four speakers, they will then open the floor to questions. And I hope you've got lots of questions and you're thinking about them. So shall we start with Benoit Clocheret, who's the CEO of Italia Group. Thank you, Benoit.
Thanks, Kevin.
Good afternoon to every one of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be in front of you this afternoon. So my name is Benoît Clocheret. I'm the CEO of Artelia and also a board member of FK. Just in a nutshell, Artelia is a 5,000 staff engineering company, employee owned and operating in the infrastructure, building and industry sector. We are one of the top 3 engineering firms in France, but we also operate worldwide through about 30 subsidiaries. You know, understanding the challenges of our cities and designing, shaping the cities of tomorrow is extremely difficult. So it's time for the deep dive. And but it's difficult, but it's demanding. But it's also very exciting. It's probably exciting because it's difficult and demanding. And we need a lot of brains and a lot of brains of engineers. And in fact, with Artelia, this is what I expect from the 5,000 staff that we have. And that's what they wake up for every morning. And that's also what they aim at delivering at our clients. Because if you check on our website, you'll see this. You'll see that our mission is to imagine, design, and develop more efficient, harmonious, and sustainable cities and regions. So this is really at the core of what we are and what we do. And in this mission, we've tried to express, as simply as possible, what we think the 3 pillars of the challenges, the 3 main challenges of the cities are. Efficiency, with the cities, they need to deliver power in the right quantity, they need to deliver safe water, they need to have efficient transport systems, they need to be sustainable, to promote sober consumptions, to promote recycling, to promote circular economy, but they also have to be as harmonious as possible to make the cities as pleasant as possible places to live, places to work, to entertain, to live with our families. And this is actually very complex to align all these 3 components, but this is the common goal that we have. And this is the goal that first and foremost our elected officials have to tackle, and our job is to assist them, sometime to guide them on how to do with it. And my intent this afternoon is not to make a very global speech on the cities of tomorrow, but more to share some ideas, I hope some food for thought, from source of inspiration for all of us, and hopefully also for a source of hope, because I'm fully convinced that our companies, they are pivotal in shaping the cities of tomorrow in a world that is quickly changing, as we have discussed so far this morning and early this afternoon, especially through the digital transformation that we are all facing. You know, probably the first consequence of digital transformation is that with the increasing power of all IT systems, we can probably model almost everything now. And as you can see here on the picture, on the upper right, there is a flooding modeling in the city of Nantes in France. In the lower right square of the slide, you can see the 4D BIM that was also mentioned earlier this afternoon. We can model transport system, we can model water systems. In fact, we can model about everything. And we can model that in systems that are very complex. We can model them in a very far quicker than we could ever do in the past. We can run many scenarios, because things that used to take 2-3 days to run, now they take a few seconds. And we can also have models that are more and more accurate, and they are also more and more accurate because they are fed with more and more data. And in fact, our modeling is a combination of mathematical models and also the input of statistics into that. And we can also model at very different scales, from very small scales to very large scales. And on this slide, what you can see is a project where we have been very much involved in trying to model at a citywide level, at a citywide scale, for the city of Santiago de Chile. We did that with 2 French partners, a very large international contractor and also a service provider. And the objective was to create a sustainable city simulator. And basically, we try to articulate all the available data that we could gather. So gather the data, put them together, trying to bring intelligence to this data, and especially to categorize all this data to make them easy to understand, easy to use, easy to express to the elected officials, because the ultimate goal was to propose or to help the mayor of Santiago de Chile to craft, to design a sustainable development policy for her town, as well as an action plan subsequently to that policy. We also were able to compare those data with the ones that we experienced, for example, in Paris. And all that you can see here, it goes from air quality to sun exposure to accessibility and so on and so forth. And what we found out, for example, is that in Santiago de Chile, the circular economy is already very much in place compared to many other cities, whereas the main issues, the main problem that they are facing is traffic issues and continuity within the city. So what the kind of first lessons that we can learn from all that is that we are better equipped than ever right now, and I think that's what we experience, many of us around the world. Better equipped to be smarter than ever, to understand our cities, to shape the cities of tomorrow. And here we are at the heart of the added value that us as engineers and engineering companies we can bring to our clients. Of course, we are hit by the digital transformation, the artificial intelligence, we are hit by the machine learning and all what we discussed earlier today. But my belief is that the people will remain in the middle of that. And of course we'll be helped more and more by the machines and by the artificial intelligence, but we'll need the human brain to put really the interpretation into that and the added value that our clients expect from us. And this is also why we need more than ever to invest on our people. And when I say to invest on our people, it's also because after the simulator in Santiago de Chile, we decided with our partners to create a cluster. So it's a completely different approach. It's not just about the data, it's also about the people. It's about putting together and to think, to develop, to create a smarter way of working together. So the private companies as well as the municipality, and we teamed up with a test municipality, and around the northern part of Paris. It's actually the location, the area where the 2024 Olympic Games will be hosted, with a stadium and a swimming pool. And what we have put together is put together all these partners. Now we have 80 partners that have gathered together, and we just bring our intelligence, our innovations, our disruptive ideas together to question the traditional value chain of our infrastructure, but also to test some new uses, new technologies. For example, we are working on a possible 3D pathway. We're working on the anti-noise walls that could produce energy. So there are numbers and numbers of ideas like that trying to select, to decant, and to categorize, so that we can also develop from that, from the experimentation, from a bottom-up approach, sustainable development policy for that area. So it's a very different approach from the one we used in Santiago de Chile. It was more systemic, technology-based approach with Santiago. Here it's really based on people putting the intelligence together and have the private sectors and the public sector work together. And here again, we have a key role as engineers, and engineering firms is, of course, to put together and to bring our creative ideas, to be creative thinkers in the process, but also to be sort of the integrator and a project manager of these initiatives. And I would like to now dedicate the last few minutes of my speech to narrow down to a smaller scale, a far smaller scale, and mobility, which is one of the red lines of our conference. And as a starting point, I would like to share with you, and I suggest that we watch this 1-minute movie that was shot by an Argentinian artist who is very much involved in looking at the transformation of cities. And I suggest that we watch that and then we comment on that.
Mr. Summer, bring me a dream. Taking a student that I'll ever see. You'll have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Summer, bring me a dream. Mr. Summer, someone to hold. We'll be so busy before it's too old. So please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Summer, bring me a
Isn't that smart infrastructure? In fact, I thought it was a good food for thought because, you know, what is striking here is that all vehicles and pedestrians, they just self-coordinate with each other independently from the infrastructure. So we are here today to talk about the smart infrastructure. And when you see that, you say, but what is smart infrastructure? Because when we think about smart infrastructure, the first ideas that come to mind are infrastructures that are heavily equipped with antennas and sensors and wires and all electronic devices. And when you watch the movie, you say, but are we on the right track? But in fact, both tracks are progressing in parallel because I'm sure that, like many of you, we are at Artelia, we have worked over the past years on several projects, especially, for example, for the city of Paris, to work on it's a real-time prediction of the traffic in the city. For example, there was also, as a result of a public policy, the implementation of a system to rent bicycles in Paris. And for those systems, a lot of investment has been made by the municipalities. It's very heavy in investment, but it has good aspects, which is the fact that those systems they are secured, they are centrally managed, they respond to a political objective, and they operate in a legal framework. But and this is exactly what you have here on this slide. You know, the smart is through the interaction between the infrastructure itself and all the vehicles that are equipped with sensors and all type of devices. But this model is also hit by some new competitors, new entrants into the system, and shaken by these new autonomous offers where the infrastructure is not really involved. It's just about the equipment, about the vehicles. And we also see that through Waze that we all know for our vehicles. We also experience this very similar thing in Paris because with regards to renting bicycles, then we have been overwhelmed over the past few months by new offers, by bike renters bringing GPS-equipped bicycles that you can just identify and locate with your cell phone. You can rent, then you drop them anywhere you want. But the systems, they are not as secure, and they are not. They are far more flexible, but they are not as secure as the first ones. And sometimes they have some strange behaviors. For example, we were hit by a heavy snow event last winter in Paris, and Waze was directing people to all the empty streets. But the streets were empty because there was a lot of snow, so you couldn't drive. So it shows that, of course, things are evolving and going towards a more and more independent systems from the infrastructure. But we are still completely there right now. But this is my last thought and my last bet is that, these security issues, these legal issues, these fine-tuning issues, they will be solved one day or another. But is it for us a source of being afraid of that? Should we be afraid of that? Should we be will be nervous because we are here to design more and more great infrastructure, smarter infrastructure, but what will we have to design? But my belief is that we will have to develop smart infrastructures in a different way. In a different way, for example, we will be back to safety and security, as we mentioned earlier. Right now, we are working, for example, on upgrading the tunnels in Paris. We are working on some street devices to protect buildings against all kinds of attacks. We also have experimentations on new roads producing energy. So we'll be back to safety, we'll be back to infrastructure producing energy in towns, maybe storing and giving back water, also hosting events. So for example, could sound like a joke, but it's not. Every year in the month of August in Paris, we use what was a kind of a former highway along the River Seine to transform it into a beach. So it's an infrastructure that is used as a road, but 1 month or 2 months is used as a beach. And I think this is more and more things like this that will happen in the future. So we'll need infrastructure that can adapt to more temporary uses than it is the case right now. And last but not least, those infrastructure, they will need to fully support something that was touched once this morning on the discussion, is one of the critical challenges that are the logistics. Because the delivery systems are completely changing. There is a lot of traffic jam in our cities due to the fact that people are parking like crazy. There is a lot more and more construction. The cities are reconstructing of themselves, which entails a lot of construction sites. And I'm back to my initial point about modeling, because we can model at a very large scale, but we can also model at a very small scale. And right now, for example, what we do for the La Défense district, the business district in Paris, we not only model streets, the traffic on streets, but we model the traffic on lanes, because we need to have this level of detail to make sure that we can properly manage all the construction sites and not create some domino effect on different building sites that can create traffic jams that we cannot support because this district needs to work. So these are my kind of thoughts this afternoon that I wanted to share with you, some experience that we have run, some projects that we have run, some ideas. And I think that the good news is maybe the infrastructure, the smart infrastructure, will not be the infrastructure full of equipment, but it will be an infrastructure that will be open to the public, open to many users. And one thing is sure is that there will be a lot of work for engineers in the future. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Benoit. That was very clear. No questions. Perhaps we could ask Thomas Bertel, from CEO of Strasbourg, to take the stage and give his presentation.
Thank you. Yes, that's me. Thank you, Gavin, for the introduction. My name is Thomas Bertel. I'm coming from Vienna, being the CEO of Strabag. And some of you who know the company might ask themselves, are they not a contracting company or are they an engineering company? And it's true, out of our 73,000 employees, about 20,000 are engineers and technicians, but they are mainly devoted to the contracting business, to the construction business. But notwithstanding that, we do have 2 engineering departments, one devoted to construction and civil engineering of about 1,000 engineers, and another one specialized in the road infrastructures business, also amounting to about 1,000 engineers. And hence, I feel deeply honored to be invited today. I think it's the first time that my company is delivering a contribution to the FIDIC conference, and I hope that I can respond to the expectations. Basically, stemming from the contracting business, we have two features in mind once we hold our presentations. The one is keep it simple, and the other is keep it colorful and a little bit hands-on. And I'll try to do that myself, although the subject is a big one. Smart cities of tomorrow is a very wide subject, and I've just 10 to 15 minutes left to give our view on that subject. Well, I try my very best. We believe that we can define our business development by defining and by finding out the mega trends which determine our environment, our business environment. And we believe that the basic megatrends for construction and also for contracting business is 3 right now. The first one is urbanization and demographics. Gavin had already pointed out in his introduction that today we have about 54% of the global population living in urban areas, and by the middle of the century it will be about 2/3 of the global population. In order to underpin the dynamism of that movement, I would like to add that in 1987 it were only 42%, and it was only 2008 that the 50% barrier had been crossed. So that underpins how dynamic the development is. We do believe that this is, of course, a major issue for Asia and Africa, as also pointed out by Gavin in the beginning. But we should not forget it is also a point for mature markets like in Germany or in Austria or in Sweden, for instance. Vienna, where I'm coming from, takes great pride in saying that they are the fastest growing German-speaking city. And they take a lot of pride that they just overtook Hamburg to be the #1 on the German-speaking map in Europe, and they're now coming second to Berlin. And another European capital which is growing even faster than Vienna is Stockholm. So we're talking, of course, about big and mega cities in Asia and Africa, but we also have a big challenge in the old continent of Europe. And hence, it is not astonishing that our friends from McKinsey are also present here today, come to the estimate that about $57 trillion have to be invested into infrastructure by 2030 in order to keep up with the global economic growth. We are in Germany today. This is the hosting country. It's a mature infrastructure market. It's an old market, but nevertheless, it's also a growth market for our industry. On the left-hand side, you see a map which gives you a clear picture of the traffic situation in that country, which is a catastrophe. I'm a German born, and I'm quite often in German. And once you are traveling on German motorways or federal roads, you will be getting aware quite fast of that fact. And that's the reason why the German federal government has concluded that they have to invest about 265 billion euros until 2030 only in order to cope with that infrastructure situation which we currently face in this old industrialized country. So my message is urbanization, demographics is a megatrend, a global megatrend, but it is also a big trend in mature countries, even in countries which we might believe to be very developed ones. Second megatrend which we have identified for ourselves, this is the big challenge to save energy and to produce sustainability in our environment. Also there we have an estimate which goes up to 48 trillion which are needed to meet the world's energy needs by 2035 only. And we have in the European Union, we have a climate and energy framework which sets 3 targets until 2030. At least 40% cuts on greenhouse gases, at least 27% share of renewable energy, and at least 27% again improvement of energy efficiency, which is a huge challenge. And we have to keep in mind when looking at those challenges that it is not the road traffic which is producing the majority or the biggest share of greenhouse gases in the world today. It is buildings. They account for the largest share. Not only in the EU, but on a global level for final energy consumption, and produce about 35% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Traffic is just 25 to 30% only. And this gives us, of course, business opportunities. Our clients are more and more asking for energy efficient solutions, for energy efficient buildings. And we being also a raw materials group, we see that our own building materials network provides us a sort of barrier of entry for new competitors, because nowadays it's very difficult in light of the above-mentioned situation to get new permits for new mixing plants for asphalt and concrete, to open new gravel pits or quarries. Third megatrend, and we have heard a lot of that today already, digitalization. To give you a picture focused on the construction industry, in the first line we have shown the productivity gains in the construction industry, in the producing industry and in the manufacturing industry for the last 10 years since 2008. Construction has a plus of 4% only, the producing industry 27%, and manufacturing industry has 34% productivity gain. The lagging behind of the construction industry is evident. The second row gives two obviously contradictory opinions in our industry regarding the importance of digitalization. Less than 6% of the construction companies, at least in Germany, believe that or use digital instruments for planning holistically. Of course, many of them are using a lot of tools separately, but a holistic digital approach in our industry is the exception. On the other hand, 93% of the players in our industry in this country believe that digitalization will affect all their processes, and the contradiction is obvious. Strabag is a company with about 15 billion in annual output, which is very much focused on Europe. We produce more than 90% of our output in Europe, and that's why I underpinned the importance of those megatrends also in the old markets. On the other hand, we have some strongholds also in the Middle East, in Africa, and in Southern America, which means that we are also very vigilant regarding the development of the megatrends in those parts of the world. And to fulfill my promise that I would like to present a hands-on presentation on the subject, I would like to give you some very practical examples which we can currently show in our company. Two of them will be from our research and development department, and two of them will be construction projects. Two of them dealing with sustainability, and two of them coping with the challenges of the urbanization trend, which I described before. The first one comes from our research and development department here in Germany. Particulate matter is a big subject in this country, especially in some major cities of the country. And we are right now testing with some partners a sort of modular moss-covered noise absorption walls, which shall be capable of binding particulate matter and hence help to reduce pollution via nitrogen oxides. This is something which will be running at least until the middle of 2020 still. The first findings are challenging, but we are continuing to work on that. The second project I wanted to present is what we call in German Nahitas, which is translated into sustainable high-tech asphalt, a pavement recipe for roads. We do that together with the Technical University of this city here in Berlin and with the Cologne University. The target is to develop an artificial photocatalytic aggregate serving as the pavement for streets, which contains titanium dioxide and helps thus reducing the level of harmful nitrogen oxides again in the air and transforms them into harmless nitrates, another way of reducing pollution in overcrowded cities. Third example is a construction project. When we are talking about the megatrend of urbanization and demographics, we feel that we can define at least four subtrends to this megatrend. The four major challenges which we feel urbanization is entailing are the establishment of an environmental friendly, sustainable infrastructure. The second is the establishment of efficient waste treatment systems. The third is water distribution and wastewater collection systems. And the fourth deals with The fourth is now out of my mind. I'll come to that later on. So and this is dealing with the first element I mentioned just before. We have built a bus rapid transport system in Tanzania, in the city of Dar es Salaam, which operates buses on dedicated thoroughfares and hence increases the attractiveness of this public transport means, because one problem of our current traffic situation and the future traffic situation is that individual transport is far privileged and far above in the acceptance of the population in front of public transport means, and this is one attempt to increase the attractiveness of public transport in the city of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. The second construction project deals with the waste treatment problem I mentioned before as a subtrend to urbanization. This is a new sewer network in the city of Singapore in Asia, which we built in the years 2015 till 2017. And this had to be built in a densely populated area. It goes without saying, Singapore is not a new city, it's a highly populated existing city. We applied the construction method of pipe jacking by laying concrete or steel pipes non-disruptively, especially suited for installations with relatively small diameters, and hence made it possible to establish such a new system in a highly populated city. So this is 4 very concrete examples from our practice. Some are still ongoing, others are already in the past, and I hope that gave you a practical picture of how we are tackling the challenge to contribute something to develop smart cities in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that, Thomas, and just about spot on. Well done. Great timing. So Alexander Jan from ARP, he's the Director for City Economics. Just appointed, I think, fairly soon, fairly recently.
Up to Chief Economist is the latest appointment,
okay.
So 2 economists on the platform at least I hear going, which is good. Okay, is it that way? Okay, good afternoon everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Having seen the sort of run-through of artificial intelligence and various other technologies, I wish we could apply it to dealing with some of the challenges facing Britain back at home at the moment. Perhaps they can apply it to solve you-know-what. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of try and run through a couple of things. I'm conscious that the next session is talking about financing and funding, and also that we've covered quite a lot today in terms of some of the mega trends that have been mentioned in terms of urbanisation. I think the point I wanted to try and draw through was the extent to which some of these technological phenomena, as they affect the demand for transport, so from a consumer point of view rather than some of the inputs we've been talking about, the supply sides today, even though I appreciate they're related, might have implications for major schemes, notwithstanding the urbanisation that's been talked about, and the implications of that for investment and indeed for then how we fund new projects and indeed design them. So these are just some charts from the United Nations which show the trend that other speakers have already highlighted, this hurtling towards urbanisation and the fact that so much of the population will be living in cities within our lifetimes. And you can see, as Gavin mentioned, the importance of those megacities, 41 sort of projected to 2030. And it's probably worth noting that, you know, there's a sort of bit of a hockey stick curve that applies to megacities. So the more densely populated, the larger they are, often, not always, they go together in that sense, the more interventions they need to keep them going. The day in, day out stress that infrastructure experiences in these teeming cities means that they need more public sector interaction, they need more interventions in order for them to maintain the quality of the services and the environment that they're designed to provide. You know, if you just look at what's going on in terms of projections for cities in the Far East and East Asia, you can see some enormous increases in population on this table across the region in Malaysia and other states. And the reason I wanted to highlight that was because that's then now manifesting itself in terms of demands for new lines. So this chart, don't try and read it, but what it's designed to do is convey the fact that just within this region, there are dozens of projects for both metro lines and railway lines, which countries are busy trying to get built. And of course, in order to build them, they need capital. And that capital is not necessarily scarce. We all hear about this wall of capital. All our pensions are apparently going to be invested in these things. But it does mean that there is competition out there for the funds required to either facilitate the borrowing or other mechanisms by which to build these schemes. And that's just in the area of metro lines and railways. And as previous speakers have already identified, there is a huge demand for investment in water and waste, renewables, energy and so forth. So in the context of that, and in the thinking about some of the technological arguments and debates, which is clearly the key theme of today, and part of the conference, I think it is worth just pausing and reflecting on what's been going on in the rail market. And what this slide shows for OECD countries is that actually there's been a bit of a softening in rail passenger demand in certain parts of the world over the last 15 or so years. And whilst China has continued to grow relatively strongly, other parts of the world, including Russia, the rest of the OECD, and indeed rates of growth in Japan and elsewhere have tended to be on the low side or indeed softening. And that's reflected in the case of the United States. What this graph shows is that over the last sort of 20 or so years, overall ridership in all United States cities has actually started to soften and fall at the margin, particularly in recent years. And that's reflected in trends for a number of world cities. So what this shows you here is with Paris at the bottom of this scale, then New York, then Toronto, then London, I think, and then Hong Kong, that there is some sort of change in the market going on for our city-based systems, perhaps less so on the intercity side, but there is something going on. And the ever-increasing use of metro systems that we've experienced in the last 10 or more years appears to be softening and potentially changing. And we've been doing some work in the UK at the moment, looking at the same phenomena. And what I really wanted to show you was, if you look at this green line on the right-hand side, this is the demand profile for London and South East commuters. It's a very large commuting area. It's experienced considerable growth for many years. And London's population, despite the headwinds and uncertainty of Brexit and so forth, is still growing by between 70 and 100,000 people a year. Employment is still strong, the economy is growing, and yet we're seeing this fall-off in commuter demand, as well as some off-peak softening. And I think, for lots of reasons, we need to be trying to understand these trends and the sort of responses that are going to be required. So what are the factors that might be underpinning some of these changes? We've done some work looking at a combination of things which we think are high impact with lower levels of uncertainty, and then a similar number of drivers where it's more difficult to actually anticipate the effects that they are likely to have. And as you can see, there are some very familiar themes here: autonomous vehicles, employment patterns, how demand is managed, the whole digital lifestyle phenomenon and various others. And I think what's interesting is that we can build scenarios in which we, this is a UK context, but I think it has read across to other parts of the world, where we can try and start to tease out how some of these trends might well affect the level of demand for our systems going forward. And in the UK, what we've kind of seen is an interesting effect where there seems to be a decoupling from people buying season tickets. So historically in the rail market in the UK, if you work in a full-time job in the same place, you tend to buy a ticket which will give you a year's worth of travel, and it's priced in such a way as to make it economically sensible if you work 46, 47 weeks a year. And what we think has been going on is that partly because of strikes and construction disruption, people have been forced into trying out maybe working for 4 days a week, and they've kind of found out finally that a lot of this technology really does work, and they're kind of adjusting their working patterns accordingly, and that's decoupling them from buying those tickets. And then, of course, the economics of every incremental journey is changing, and that's resulting in a reduction in demand. And similarly, we're seeing that the growth in self-employed individuals, so people who aren't working for big corporates, those individuals tend again to have a different view about how much they're prepared to commit to commuting by rail, for example. And then a couple of other observations. One is our dear friends, the millennials, who seem to be more interested in mixing and matching how they get around. They may not be as wedded to cars as some of us were, maybe still are, but they are using bikes and hire services, some of the things that have been talked about. They're using Uber alongside other forms of transport. And that, again, is having this effect of washing through on the demand side. And then finally, we're seeing, again, due to technology, two changes in the leisure market, if you will, the non-work market. One is around retail. Many of you will be aware of the changes going on in retail, which is seeing less footfall in shops and so forth, and a shift from bricks and mortar to click and deliver or collect. And then the other thing is people's leisure patterns are changing. So they may be sitting at home, they're ordering food in with Netflix rather than going out and making journeys. So all those things are kind of going on in the mix. I mean, my own view is that those things are unlikely in their own terms to be able to completely overturn the model. I mean, this graph very quickly shows you for London, the red line is effectively the morning commute for London commuters. And even if we saw some erosion of demand, I don't think the bicycles and the Ubers and all the rest of it are going to be able to deliver the morning commute. But this then brings us on to the question as to how do we secure funding for these projects going forward? And I think that one of the ways that we can continue to renew and build our lines is to look at other forms of funding, not just the fare box, but other ways and traditional forms of taxation, but also look at things like land value capture, which, as you know, is the vogue at the moment. Everybody's kind of talking about it. What this piece of research shows is that basically close to stations, we see an outperformance in property values, both residential and commercial, compared to other parts of the property market. So the question is, where that's happening with new lines, new stations, should we be trying to find a way of capturing some of that value uplift in order to help then pay for the infrastructure in question? And that really then starts to challenge perhaps the way in which we plan our projects and we think about them. And what this graph really suggests is, what this chart is showing, is that actually income generation and value capture and uplift along a line may be something that we should place greater emphasis on, in addition to the user benefits, the environmental benefits of a new scheme, which have traditionally dominated the cost-benefit framework when we decide to put new infrastructure in. Perhaps with the slight exception of certain parts of the world, such as Hong Kong, which, as you know, has the MTR model, is very, very much development led, so an exception which perhaps is worth pondering on. And I think if we were to do that, what we might end up with is an approach which actually changes some of our alignments. So instead of an alignment purely being or primarily being about the time savings it's generating and the fare box, what we might do is make the infrastructure go a slightly different way in order to stimulate development and growth in these cities, which, as we've seen, are growing at a pace. And this was kind of partly what we achieved with Crossrail, the new east to west link through the centre of London, where, as you can see from this chart, property developers and property owners together provided sort of 30% more of the cost of the project, whereas historically the central government component would have been a much bigger chunk of the overall funding package. And, you know, as I mentioned, this approach of blending finance has been used elsewhere. This chart shows some research we did which looked at those mixes. And I think the really interesting thing about this is that if you can get these different sources of funding harnessed together, you can actually, to put it bluntly, make it harder for governments to cancel projects, because you've effectively created a coalition of interests behind a project, which means that it's just much harder politically to cancel it. So when Crossrail was, when there was a change in government and there was a Treasury review of Crossrail, effectively they would have got 100% of the political downside, but only a third of the money back as such. So I think we should think about how we pay for these projects, who's paying for them, who's benefiting from them, and how that then plays out in terms of the deliverability of those projects, their acceptability, and indeed these coalitions between business, between this sector, government, developers, and so forth. So to conclude, I think we all agree that urbanisation presents lots of opportunities. We've got these disruptive factors. I think many of them are exciting. I think we have to embrace them. I don't think they are going to fundamentally change the case for delivering schemes which transform the way our cities work. I mean, as we all know, transport is about creating livable, attractive cities. It's very hard to see a world within which metros don't play a core role in that. But it may force us to look again differently, to extend our thoughts about innovation to funding as well as to other things. That in turn will have impact on governance and the coalitions we build in order to deliver the metros of the future. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Alexander. That was great. That was super and very clear as well. So if we turn to our last speaker, Frank Steinbacher, CEO of Steinbacher Consult.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Last but not least, it's me. You see, I'm not wearing a tie, so I want to become more practical. I want to introduce to you a current in-progress project here in Germany. We are planning and constructing the world's largest EV charging station here in Germany. And we are also planning and constructing the world's largest DC power network for the industry. I've learned this morning that I'm an engineer in a very complex and slow-changing field in construction, infrastructure, and energy, and I totally agree on this. And we have also heard a lot of words about disruptive influence on our market, whether it will come or not. But I want to show you or explain you that this disruptive influence is already here, that our players will change, that the people we as engineers have to deal will be totally different in future. We are used to deal with municipalities, government, or larger industry companies to solve their problems, but our new players will be from totally different fields. And also this project I want to show here is not a city of tomorrow, it's a village of tomorrow. We are developing this new infrastructure in a very small village in Germany. There are only 4,000 people living. So also in this area we have to improve our infrastructure, and this change we have to fulfill is based on a very important thing we have in change now, that our mobility, that our infrastructure for mobility is changing from combustion to electrification. And therefore, I want to present to you this project and thinking with you about the infrastructure of the future, or a possible infrastructure of the future, based on the change on the energy market and the change on mobility needs we have. So I want to introduce to you first the company, the private company who is paying this project, who is investing 20 by 25 million euros for this project. I believe you don't know this company. The company's name is Sortimo. Maybe never heard here in this room, but this company is a big player. It's a big player in performing logistics. It's an enabler for logistics. His clients, or their clients, are people who do logistics and do mobility, and they have to fulfill their client needs. How will the logistics, how will mobility work in future, and how can we assist our client? And I guess, as most of the participants here will believe, that our mobility will change to electrification. So this company started about 2 years ago with us, thinking about how we not only have to change our cars or the interior in our cars for our logistic behavior, how can we, or how should we also change the infrastructure behind, and also the infrastructure for our energy who needs to support this new type of mobility. And therefore we started this project, and somehow, it was not the plan, we made it to the world's largest EV charging station, and this in a country where the change from combustion to electric vehicle is a very slow growing business. So this company needed to fulfill its clients' need to think in a totally different way, to deliver in future a product for mobility, but also a solution in the background to fulfill the energy needs for the mobility. Because our standard or key player on this market, on the infrastructure side and also on the energy side, they're not moving. But these disruptive industries need to change quickly to fulfill their clients' needs. So now we are moving in the southern part of Germany, in the vicinity of Munich, into a very small village, where's the headquarters of this company called Sortimo. They have their construction facility with about 3,000 people working there. And maybe there's a laser pointer. Here's a laser pointer. On this field next to their construction site, this all belongs to the company. The new EV charging station will be built, will be set up. And in the same time, we set up a totally new energy grid for the entire industry production in this field. So also the player you know here, or better you don't know here, also maybe the company behind this project you won't know, we are a very small engineering company. We're about 350 people working, but I often say we are a one-stop provider. We have all the different, let's say, knowledge and parts of things we need to change with such a project within our company. But one very important item was missing: the software engineering and setting up a new human interface between infrastructure and the client. That's also a very important thing missing in our projects, that not only our infrastructure needs to get smart, or let's say the mobility platform we use with our infrastructure, that also the communication and the interfaces between these two parts need to grow together, and we need to set up interfaces. And that was the reason why we founded also a very small company with just 12 software engineers to develop maybe a solution for a new user interface between infrastructure, energy, and the mobility needs. But what is the driving factor next to Sortimo's aim as well behind this project? We believe that in the electrification of mobility, there is a large regional level of added value, that a region can grow wealth due to the change from combustion to EV-driven mobility. And also a very important thing we think about, and we believe it's not only an issue in Germany, it's also an issue of other countries as well, is that due to the electrification in mobility, we have the chance to set up an autonomy in mobility, that we are not longer dependent on importing the power for our mobility needs, which is a very large value and industry factor here in Germany from other countries by oil and gas. And also on the other hand, we believe that, I'm not sure whether you have heard this word Energiewende. We started a few years ago here in Germany. It's a kind of energy revolution. We started to set up more production of renewable energy. We also believe that the change in mobility is a major core component of this Energiewende, of this energy revolution. Maybe most of you don't know that in 2017, Germany destroyed the amount of energy to enable over 2 million cars for free to drive by power, by electric power, over 15,000 kilometers per year. That's the amount of renewable energy in Germany was destroyed in 2017 already. And this value will increase because there is no market behind to take this renewable energy out of the network. And therefore we believe that there will gain up and grow up new connections between energy, infrastructure and mobility. And as also former mentioned, and as a major topic within this Congress, it's about digitalisation. It's just about connecting different things together which haven't fit together in the past. So we believe that the electrified mobility will increase the change of infrastructure and especially will connecting next to the sectors new key players. And there we will see this disruptive development. But what about this small village? What's the advantage of this small municipality we have here in the southern part of Germany? In Germany, we have the big advantage that delivering the power, delivering the force for mobility is a self-government responsibility. So if municipalities do it the right way, they have the possibility to improve the distribution, the production of energy, and also mobility in the area and to increase their value, their added value. So, and what else do we bring together? Next to this electrification of mobility, we try to fit in there Industry 2.0. We set up within this project the longest DC direct current power network to deliver in future the power for the machines within the construction site of Sortimo and other companies located within this area without going the way from alternate current to direct current within the machine. Because everything now is coming from direct current. If you think about wind power, wind farms, if you think about solar power, that's all direct current. Why do we all do these conversions and have a large loss in energy? So what does this just mean for the location side of Sortimo? By setting up this DC network, they will save by 24% of energy for their actual production. And by changing to electric mobility, only within their company, they will save up to 43% for their mobility. And that's equal, just for this one company at the headquarters, by 2.4 million saved annually. So if you look further, let's look around the area of the small village. It's also compared to other countries, to other sites maybe you're coming from, not a very large area and maybe not even a lot of cars. We're talking there about less than 200,000 cars. But these cars in this area are traveling 2.6 billion kilometers per year. This means that this area has a cash drain for the power of mobility by 270 million euros per year annually for the fuel. And due to electrification and new infrastructure and energy distribution, we can set up this better. We have more profit on this. The same mobility we can do electrified by about 50% of the costs. So finally, around 134 million euros per year are available there in this area as spending power, an increased spending power by 135 million euros per year in this area. That's a large number. And these numbers see other core players. The peoples who think online are working or ticking totally different to the people who are working offline. And now we have also a change in this area that we're bringing online processes to offline situations, to offline infrastructure. How will this project look like? So this largest EV charging station, I'm not sure what it's still right now. It was the largest one about 3 months ago. Maybe somewhere over the world, the larger one is right at the moment in planning or in construction. We don't know it. But as a very important point is that the entire energy is coming regionally. It's renewable and needs to fulfill this added value aim within this area. So that's how the site is looking like. The construction work started in February this year. Right at the moment, we are in the middle of the progress, and we want to finalize this project by mid of next year, because as you know, infrastructure is also slow in constructing. So we also have to take in mind that we don't only have a disruptive change, but we also need time to construct it. So what we set up, and these are all new possibilities coming with this new green mobility, this green energy we have, it's also possible to set up an entire new structure planning. As far as we know, it's the greenest industrial estate, 40,000 square meters in Germany. And also the authorities behind were very open-minded related to this project. In Germany, we have had the legal permission for this project within less than 6 months. That's very quick for Germany. I'm not sure how it looks in your countries, but for Germany, that's very quick. We also implemented new approaches in pollution control. In Germany, for example, very important is noise abatement. You're not allowed to develop areas if you don't fulfill noise abatement or have limitations already in these areas. But due to the change in the electrified mobility, we have had new possibilities to rise up new ideas in planning. And just as information, the technical layout for this charging station is 4,000 vehicles by day. Already Sortimo has an amount or a need of about 400 cars to charge by day, just as a side information. Yeah, within the first stage, we're constructing the entire site. We will set up a new, we call it campus electromobility. We set up their superchargers with charging power larger than 450 kilowatt. And we have over 160 DC parking lots up to 120 kilowatt. Why this high amount of energy? Because we know from the car makers here in Germany, but also from Asia and other countries where the way will head. So we will need these fast chargers to set up a distribution channel for energy to earn money with this renewable available energy. And the new key players, where are they? That's retail, that's gastronomy, that's mobility, that's infrastructure, and also logistics. So this all is placed together within this campus building. So one key player here, for example, is a large retail company. Yeah, we have to set up new products and services for our clients. So that's just an overview to deliver a one-stop solution for the demands of mobility and infrastructure in the future. And due to time, I just want to give you the information. New markets also for engineers will arise in relation between infrastructure, retail, and logistics. So we believe this will be a great market of the future I'm not afraid of, but we all need to be flexible to be open for these new changes in engineering. Thanks for your attention.
That's excellent, Frank. Thank you. Superb, yeah. So, Greg, how long have we got left? 10 minutes? Okay, 10 minutes. We're running a bit behind, but we started a bit behind as well, so Greg's very kindly given us 10 minutes for questions. But perhaps I can start the questions just whilst people are thinking about what we want to ask. Alexander, I'm going to start with you because I was quite interested in the financing aspects of funding cities of the future and how we get over this. You talked quite a lot about mass transit, but I think it was the financial aspects. And what do you see as the key funding? You mentioned land value capture, but what are the financing mechanisms do you think there are that can help us fund this going forward? Because it's going to be an enormous demand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will vary from country to country. I was talking over lunch with a colleague from France, and we were musing about the fact that, French motorways have the péage system, which is a very valuable source of income to keep the road system up and running. In the United Kingdom, it's a free-for-all on the motorway network, and any attempt to introduce charges on interurban roads has been met with a degree of opposition. And yet, paradoxically, driving into London now costs a lot of motorists sort of £12, must be about €3 at today's exchange rate. And I think that's clearly a mechanism that economists have lusted after intellectually, which is to have some sort of user charge which can then be used to fund. So I think that's one. I think, a mix with property taxes is another. There'll always be a need for state financing of some description. I think the experience we've seen from other countries, United States, Germany and elsewhere, is that if you can actually connect the people who are benefiting and the cities that are having the benefit of infrastructure with those who are paying for them, it improves the public acceptability of them. And that does mean that local authorities, city government, regional government need greater powers in order to then get on and implement the investment that these areas need.
Excellent. Great. And it was great having two economists on the panel as well. So Benoit, your presentation was a lot around people, thinking about the needs of people and the involvement of our staff going forward. Just interested to see what additional resources you think we may need to bring into our businesses in order to take advantage of the industry, to take advantage of the mass urbanisation and cities.
What we have experienced in the past years is the emergence of BIM. I think in the building industry, it is being a revolution, really, similar to moving from using the pen to the computers. And so we have hired a lot of new engineers having capabilities in BIM management, and we have trained a lot because there are not that many training sessions and young engineers coming from the schools with that talent pool, that talent. Then in terms of data scientists, so we are at the beginning of that because we know we have to dive into it, and sometimes we are a bit reluctant to invest too much into it because we don't know how much it will be used in the short term. But I think it's definitely something we are entering into, and we are entering into also because we are more and more exposed to startups. There was a question this morning around that, and I see over the past 2-3 years, we have entered a cluster of startups. So we are interacting with a lot of startups that feed us with a lot of thoughts and a lot of also energy and willingness to invest in more data scientists and statisticians and mathematicians, people who are on top of being in the digital world. They come from they have a lot of math into them.
Excellent. Okay. So I've got a question for you, Thomas, and for you, Frank, but I'm going to see what we've got coming from the audience. Do we have any questions in the audience that people want to ask? Hopefully you have. Okay, there's a gentleman over here.
Thank you. Thank you for this excellent and diverse panel, by the way. Michel Caron from CETEC France. You expressed many issues where engineering community can bring solutions to the future of cities. Now, there is one point that Benoit raised, is that we can also be the integrator. We're not alone. There are operators, there are contractors that can play that role. But I think, and I believe this is a message for FIDIC, that is a fight that is worth fighting. I'm sorry, this is an issue which is worth fighting, that is for the engineering community to be the integrator of solutions for the future of cities. But we are not alone. I mean, where are the philosophers that imagine and design the cities, the ancient Greek cities? They're not among us. I'm glad that we have an economist among the panel, because it is an added value for sure. But we need urbanists, we need architects, we need philosophers, and we have to be humble in raising these issues. We can be the integrator, but we need to be connected to all these people. And I would like to, if you could build up on that, I would be delighted.
Okay, I'm not too sure quite what the question is, but but I think the message is, and perhaps you can turn it into a question. The message is we need to be the integrator. FIDIC needs to lead this.
We can claim being the integrator, but we need some people around, and this can be thought of again.
Okay,
and maybe if I can take the. It's also probably the fact that the city of tomorrow will not only come with more technology and more artificial intelligence and more data and more, but also with the people living in the cities, with also the appropriate governance. We haven't talked about governance and how the politicians, they play their role, and how how all these different knowledge can interact together and work together to create the cities of tomorrow.
So, Alexander?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I was smiling because, as many of you know, Arup, the founder of our firm, studied philosophy with engineering. And the values of Arup are built, amongst other things, around this concept of total architecture and total design. And he always strove to emphasize the importance that things that we design in engineering terms should not only be functional and cost effective, but also should be aesthetically pleasing. So I think you resonate a very important theme. And to pick up on one thing that was said earlier today, as with other firms here, we are a staff-owned enterprise. And I think that does give us the capacity to perhaps hold on to those values when the market, in the short term anyway, struggles with them. And Arup has gone from being 100% building engineering to around a third building engineering, a third infrastructure, and a third consulting. We haven't quite reached the philosophers yet, but and I think that convergence of services and ideas, all the tech stuff, the software engineers, and the like, will have to come together to deal with to put together the solutions to these ever increasingly complex problems that we're trying to deal with.
Okay, Thomas, can I just ask you to perhaps, you put up some great case studies there, really interesting and quite varied as well. In terms of engineers being the integrator and connecting all of these bits together, perhaps you could maybe just say a few words around that and some of the examples or case studies that you put forward.
Yeah, I think, Gavin, the one key word for the challenges of the future is really interdisciplinarity.
Yeah.
That is something which we did not yet really learn to live, because we had the silos where we lived one besides the other, and that has to be overcome. And that was an experience which we also made, and that's why I had also given our cooperation partners. It's not us alone who could contribute the know-how to come to solutions in the examples I promoted, but we had to cooperate with somebody else. And this will be the challenge of the future for all of us.
Excellent. I hope that answered your question. Excellent, great. So Frank, your presentation I thought was fascinating, and it just shows what engineers perhaps can do as well, to pushing the boundaries a bit. So it's quite interesting, and I think the electrification and the work you've been you've been doing and that particular site which is specific developed, how do we replicate that around the world? How do we grow from that and integrate it into perhaps some of the more conventional engineering companies around today in this room?
Yeah, it was not specifically developed for this site. We already duplicate this site. We have 6 more projects already here in Germany. And right at the moment, we are also speaking with the Asian market because especially China is one of our key players as well in this project, because when we started the project and we had the target we wanted to aim, we didn't find solutions in Europe. And that was the reason why we as a small enterprise headed towards China to find their partners to develop the solution for this change in electrification mobility. So especially for us, it was a very large effort to make this possible. And now we also became developers of electric components. This has never been a part of our business in the past, but as already mentioned, we need to diversify our knowledge, our spirit and our open mind into new directions to deliver new solutions for infrastructure.
Excellent. I think that's a great example to all of the firms here about what we can do, perhaps. If there's any more burning questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Just come. Okay, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. This is a question of benchmarking to Mr. Steinbacher, just like what you asked.
Yeah.
Replicating your idea. I'm exactly doing a study on that in Indonesia, but for different modes of transportation, because if you go to Jakarta or you go to Saigon, you will see more motorcycles than car. We are doing exactly that kind of study in 2 cities in Indonesia right now for a big industrial country to try electrification of vehicles, but more on motorcycles. We are now going to create several samples of electrical charging stations all over the city. But I think your idea of centralizing it and making it more attractive probably will be a good idea. I need to talk to you about that because we are on a different scale, motorcycles, not cars like you. Thank you.
Excellent. Maybe next year you can come back and tell us all about this too, Casey. So 4 great presentations, all very different, and I think you really covered the subject well, and some really in-depth stuff, some more high-level case studies, some really good presentations, and the economics as well. So can you join me, please, in thanking our speakers?